Hello, I'm Jim Cornell, and this is Base to Base, the weekly biotech podcast from Air Coastal Media. Yes, welcome again to the Base to Base biotech podcast, and this is number 51, and it's going live on March the 20th. Today is apparently Alien Abduction Day, although it doesn't say if that's being abducted by an alien or humans abducting aliens. I can't say I have experience of either. Last week we talked to Hansa Biopharma CEO René Aguiar-Lucander about imlifidase for kidney transplant patients, Chiron Bio CEO Amelia McLaughlin about glycosylation, and hydrogel-based drug delivery solutions company Amicathera's CEO Mike Cook. This week we chat with Gabriel Levin, gynecologic oncologist at the McGill University Health Centre in Montreal and Director of Oncology at CureLab Oncology. And that is about Elenagen, a promising therapeutic advance for women with platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. We also chat with Eden Ben, CEO of Amorphical, about nano-amorphous mineral therapeutics inspired by blue crayfish, and Hans Schambye, CEO of BOOST Pharma, a company making progress in the battle with brittle bone disease. If you do have news or suggestions for who should be on the podcast, or indeed any other suggestions or comments, please do get in touch at jim@deeptechdigest.com, which is also the address you can use if you're interested in advertising or sponsoring a podcast episode or for event coverage. All right, let's get to the news headlines for some of the news you may have missed over at deeptechdigest.com. There were positive results from a severe atopic dermatitis drug trial. Steer Bio has been launched to find curative therapy for lymphedema, and new capsule technology has opened a new window into studying individual cells. Base Immune has expanded into fibrosis. Enodia Therapeutics has acquired preclinical assets from Kezar Life Sciences, and new preclinical data was published for POLG disease treatment. A new Netherton syndrome treatment has received fast-track designation, as has a myotonic dystrophy type 1 drug, and GenScript has opened a European mRNA hub. New data on achondroplasia has been presented. A focal epilepsy cell therapy treatment has been given IND clearance, and EDPB and EDPS are supporting harmonisation of clinical trials under the European Biotech Act. And you can read all of these and plenty more at deeptechdigest.com. Something a little bit different to kick off this week, and when I received information about a treatment that related to blue crayfish, I was intrigued. When I was director of an aquarium, we had a rare blue lobster, and of course lobsters molt. The blue crayfish, which looks a lot like a blue lobster, molts as well, although it is a freshwater species. So what's the connection between a crayfish molting and treating disease? Well, apparently a lot. Amorphical is a biopharma company advancing a novel class of nano-amorphous mineral therapeutics. To tell us more is Eden Ben, the company's CEO. Hi Ben, great to talk to you today, and I'm really interested in this story, so let's get started, and maybe you could tell me a little bit about the company.
Yes, so Amorphical is an Israeli biotechnology company that established in 2004 based on discovery from the nature, biomimicry, and based on that we get into a few years of research, and eventually what we discover it's nano-amorphous mineral in general, and start to research how we can treat and what we can treat. Eventually we find that we can treat from bone metabolic disorder up to inflammatory disease, included solid tumors, which also have the relation to inflammatory. The company holds 193 patents globally, 130 granted already. Because it's a platform technology, we have the ability to treat wide disease, and we're the first company that have the ability to produce nano-amorphous minerals. Today, our focus is on 4 diseases. It's from hypoparathyroidism to osteoporosis, Crohn's disease, and pancreatic cancer.
All right, so could you tell me the background story about the blue crayfish, maybe?
Yes, of course. Great story that all the lobsters that we know in the world, in nature, change their shell, rebuild it. And it takes them, when they take off their shell, they rebuild it around 1 month, the time of to build a new skeleton. This blue crayfish that live in fresh water, it taking 3 days rebuild. It take off its shell and rebuild it only in 3 days. Now think about the opportunity that we can have, replace 40% of our body weight and rebuild it in 3 days. And based on that, we start to research and understand how does it happen and what it's remarkable process. And what we discovered that before it take off its shell, it start to collect minerals from the food, but hold it in different way that we know that exist in the nature. Hold it in amorphous structure, nanoparticle size. Now, these blue crayfish do it with amorphous calcium carbonate, but today we are using this process and technology on other minerals.
All right, so could you maybe go into a bit more detail on nano-amorphous calcium carbonate and how it works, not necessarily in the crayfish, but in what you're doing?
Yes, of course. So today, must mention that we are not taking it anymore from the blue crayfish. It took us 8 years to synthesize it and to mimic it, and today we are producing it in our factory. What's so special in those minerals? It's 2 things. One, because of the amorphous shape and the nanometric size, we can take it, consume it in a tablet, in a capsule, in so many ways that we produce. And it's make a reaction in 2 situations. One, when emit low mineral environment, low calcium environment, and can be absorbed easily, if we're talking about, for example, osteoporosis, when we lack of calcium in the bone and can be absorbed easily. And in the other end, much more important, it's the carbonate. That today, the common factor of chronic inflammatory disease and some of cancer, it's based on local acidity, which it means the pH level it's lower than normal. Now, normal pH is 7.4. And the way that our body daily treat those local inflammation, it's the controller, it's called bicarbonate. And when the pH is going down and we start to have chronic inflammation, it's because we don't have enough bicarbonate in our body. And there is few reasons for that: nutrition, stress, and age. And then we start to develop chronic inflammation, chronic disease such as osteoarthritis, Crohn's disease, colitis, and more. And as I said, our product get into the bloodstream, and when it meet local acidity, local pH lower than the normal, the carbonate become bicarbonate, which is the natural way of our body to treat inflammation. Increase the pH level to normal, and then have the ability to treat the inflammation. So this is the structure of those minerals and what they can do. And it, because of the amorphous shape, it have this ability to do this functioning.
I know that you're working on a lot of different conditions. I wonder if you could tell me something about some of your clinical trials and what they're addressing and maybe some of the results from those.
So as I mentioned, our first drug was actually to metabolic disease that related to calcium. It's called hypoparathyroidism. It's a rare disorder. We finished phase 1 a few years ago. Today we are in phase 2, FDA regulation. We're going to finish recruitment next month. The second indication that we are working on is osteoporosis. We did 2 clinical study. that prove that we are not only stopping the disease from progress, we are rebuild bone and we take women backward from osteoporosis to osteopenia and even earlier. And this is in the environment of minerals, as I mentioned, the calcium observation. And then we have the inflammatory disease such as Crohn. We did a clinical study in Israel, phase 2, double blind, and we take patient with moderate to severe of the disease, and we show that after 3 months we have remarkable reduction, but after 6 months they have full remission of the disease. And again, also here we're treating the problem, the local acidity of the Crohn in the guts. And the last one, it's cancer, pancreatic cancer. We are now in 2 clinical studies, one on stage 4 pancreatic cancer and one on stage 3 and 4. But we get into specific this cancer because we treat several patients as a compassionate treatment and we have great results. And when I saying great results, that we have just one example. One lady, she were diagnosed with pancreatic cancer stage 4 at November 23. And now she's still living. It's more than 2 years when usually they have between 3 months to 6 months survival. And we have other case report like that.
Does it have other applications, or are you investigating its use in other applications?
Yeah, we are running a lot of preclinical study just to have some other indication in the pipeline, such as osteoarthritis, colitis, psoriasis, and other more. But we are a small company, so we are trying to focus on the other indication that I mentioned before.
Does that mean that you're looking for partnerships for moving some of these forward?
Yes, actually, the more it's progress of the most indication that progress such as hypopara or Crohn disease, yes, we are looking to doing license agreement with pharma company or co-development. So yeah, we're talking with pharma company globally and hoping to do some deals with them.
I guess this is loosely mineral-based medicine. Is that a field that there are a lot of companies in? And is it like a growing field?
Actually, not at all. I'm not aware of any other company that been trying to do mineral-based treatment, because actually we're the first one that doing it with amorphous minerals, and other company going to other so many complex stuff and work on things that been working before. I don't know any of the company in the world working on that.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that there are opportunities to do more things in?
I can tell you, I think it is because I see the reaction over the year when we come to companies and to physicians. They just don't believe that mineral can treat those diseases. Just don't believe because they never saw any of that. I remember that me talking with one physician and he said, show me some article about this technology. And I said, we invented it. It's new. There is no article. There is no history of that. I think over the year, when we show more and more clinical evidence, companies start to dig in and go after that.
Obviously, we're talking about something that you derived from the blue crayfish, but do you think that there are other potential treatments that could be derived from other species?
Totally. I fully believe in the nature. The nature has been doing R&D for millions of years. We just need to find a way to copy some of the things, understand where we can use it for the humans. So yes, I'm sure there is so many solutions that we can find in biomimicry.
And how do you come to make that connection in the first place? It's one thing to say, okay, we have this nano-amorphous calcium carbonate and it's working on all of these different things, but how do you initially say, well, this could be useful for that?
At the beginning, as I said, the founder of the company looked at the lobster and he thought about calcium disease, osteoporosis, and breaking bones. This is where we started. And over the year, we understand that we have also the carbonate that can have effect. And one of the reasons that also that we find a way that we understand and science understand that osteoporosis is not only a bone disease. It's inflammatory disease that affect on the bone. And then we start to test it on the lab, how we affect osteoblast and osteoclast. From that, it opens to so many options. And we start to testing it in the lab and then move to clinical.
And obviously, this is coming from initially from a marine species or actually a freshwater species. But can all of this, not just on the crayfish, but can all of this be done without adversely affecting fragile ecosystems?
Yeah, the company established in 2004, it took us 10 years to synthesize it and produce it by ourselves, to find a way to create those minerals in the factory and hold it in amorphous shape. So today we are not using any of the blue crayfish substance. We produce it by ourselves.
So it's not something that you can harvest because they use the molt to build their next exoskeleton.
Yeah, exactly. This is the reason why we had to find a way to produce it by ourselves. We couldn't take it. And we need to kill actually the lobster to take it out before molting to take the capsule. So we understand that it's not economic, it's not financial, make any reason because it's so expensive that we must find a way to do it by ourselves. And then also we have the ability to write many patents about it because it's a process that we are doing in the factory and not nature process, that we can't patent it.
Does that process apply to other minerals? I mean, could you use the
Yes.
same?
Yeah, today we are producing magnesium carbonate, amorphous magnesium carbonate, amorphous iron, and we are testing it on different variety of disease and also see the observation in the human body. And the most important thing for us is to keep it safe. The reason that we use mostly calcium carbonate, it's because it's very safe. You can use big amount of calcium carbonate and can be absorbed easily in the body. Iron, magnesium, and other minerals needs to maintain low dosing because if you take it a little bit more like magnesium, it can be risky.
Right. It has the introduction of AI been important in developing any of these potential treatments?
Not right now. We are using AI at a regular company that help us to work faster on any of the tasks, but not helping us discover anything new yet.
So, where are you at with the clinical trials? I know you mentioned some of them before, but where do they go into the future?
So today we're, as I mentioned, Hippopara, we are in phase 2 FDA. Now we are in a fundraise round to fundraise money to go with osteoporosis, Crohn's disease, and pancreatic cancer to phase 2 FDA and EMA.
All right. And is there anything else in the pipeline? I know you mentioned some of the other things like magnesium and
Yeah, with magnesium, actually, we're gonna run soon a clinical study that combine magnesium and calcium on osteoarthritis that create from drug on BRCA on another type of cancer. So we have one few other clinical study that in the pipeline if it's related to other type of cancer. And we combination with drugs on osteoporosis, we know that the effect of our product with other drug showing better efficacy and better safety.
you mentioned about partnerships, and you also mentioned things like talking to other physicians that are a little skeptical. Are you going to lots of events to showcase what you're doing, and what's the reaction like to that?
Yeah, first of all, the reaction of physician, it used to be spectacle. These days, when we have clinical, it's much more hard, evidence-based, so it's a little bit easier, but all the year they told us, bring data. It took us a few years, and now we have data, so they are less skeptical. But yes, we are all the time go to conference, and actually just last week we present in ECHO in Sweden on the gastro. We had a poster on the Crohn clinical study, and sent the physician that they run the study. And yes, we are more and more have attention from other physicians that come to us, and we are going and talk with so many. We added few KOL in the osteoporosis and in cancer that joined to the company, and again, it's give more confidence to pharma company and to other physicians to join us.
What do you think the next, I don't know, 12 to 18 months looks like for the company? What are you looking for?
First of all, we're going to finish phase 2 FDA with the first drug. So I'm sure that in the coming year, we will be able to sign a license agreement on this indication, at least, because I talked with few pharma companies globally. Second thing, we're working also on IPO, NASDAQ IPO, which probably will be at the end of 2027. We need more evidence. And in the next 12 months, I assume that we're going to start at least 2 phase 2 FDA EMA clinical studies and phase 3 on our first indication.
Are things like nano-amorphous calcium carbonate cost effective compared to other comparative treatments?
Yes. It's much more biological treatment, which it's very common today. It's very expensive, and other synthesize of hormones very expensive. Compared to them, it's much more cheap. And eventually, when we will get to the market, we assume that we will be much, much cheaper compared to other drugs that are available, but not cheap like a supplement, because it's very complex to develop it and to produce it. But compared to drugs, it will be probably between 30 to 50% cheaper.
The field of mineral therapeutics in general, obviously, it's kind of in its infancy. How do you see that evolving?
We have a lot of patents, so I hope we can protect our company as much as we can. I assume only when we will be with our first drug in the market, then other company realize the potential of that. Now I talk with pharma company, and some of them look at it and they question about it because it's novel, different perspective on looking on drugs, because eventually we are treating the core problem with something that it's too simple for them compared to other drugs that they're selling in by billions, and they treating some of the symptoms, and they are very complex. And so I assume that they will start to look to this area only when we will have the first drug approved. Some of them already believe in us because they are talking with us, and I assume that we will sign deal with 1 or 2 companies. But you know how that works. They take you when you are young, pay not that much until you prove that it works and you have FDA approval and EMA.
But I guess that, as you said earlier, once you have data, those data make a massive difference, because then it's not just a concept, it's here's the proof that what we're doing is working.
Exactly. This is why I have also now I have the opportunity to talk with pharma company, and they come back to me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's always the same story. Once you get to the point where you don't need them, then they come and help you. It's
Yeah,
unfortunate.
I had a talk recently, and some one of the companies said to me, "Yeah, you need some article published in good journals." I said, "Okay, we have 15 article peer-review published." And said, "15, okay." Now and I said, we publish other hospital publish based on our product, so we have evidence.
All right, those are the only questions I had. Is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't cover?
We're just so excited to do this because it's really novel. We see what happened to those patients, especially now in pancreatic cancer. It's such horrible disease, and we hope that we can, and we believe, and we see it now, that we will bring good solution to some of those disease, which is effective and safe solution. And I hope the world understand that we can treat disease differently, much safer way, and work on the problem and not only on the symptom. It's complex, but it can be less complex. This is what I believe in.
And I guess that also translates to one of the biggest problems with any treatments, is especially the more expensive ones, is that yes, maybe you can afford it in North America and parts of Europe and Japan and Israel, but there are countries where those treatments are unrealistic. So
Yeah.
hopefully this is something that can be more of a global treatment.
We aiming for global, yes. Yes. We assume that it could be cost effective, safer treatment. One of the problem, I must touch this point, that one of the problem that when you go to physician and give you drug, I know Crohn's disease, for example, it help you for one of the symptoms in Crohn, but then it can harm the kidney or other stuff, the same drug. And then you need to go to another physician because this drug is not safe enough, and then to have another treatment, and then you're rolling from one physician to another that treat his problem and not other problem that the drug creates. So I hope that we will be able to reduce this cycle.
All right. And I did meant to ask, what's the delivery method of this? And is it something that you have to repeat, or is it like a one and done?
Yeah, it depends on the disease, but yeah, you need to repeat it. Most of it, it's peros, it's capsule, powder, sublingual powder. If it's psoriasis, we give it on the skin. If it's lung disease, inflammatory disease such as COPD that we are working on, we give it in inhalation. But yeah, it needs to take it consistently.
But even if it's something like that, it takes away that need of people to have to go into a doctor's or a hospital to have it administered. So that's a big economic boost right there.
Yes, and it's very safe, so you can take it long as you need for years.
Blue crayfish and diseases. As we touched upon there in the interview, you do wonder how many other species are holding secrets that may be useful in disease treatment. Not that it means that we should be going out there and harming or destroying species just for that, something that has to be done sensitively and ethically, but still an interesting area of treatment study. Next, it's CureLab Oncology, which is a clinical stage biotech company focused on developing safer, more effective treatments for solid tumours and inflammatory conditions. To tell us about their work on ovarian cancer and their lead program Elenagen is Dr. Gabriel Levin, gynecologic oncologist at the McGill University Health Centre and Director of Oncology at CureLab. Hello, Gabriel. I really appreciate you being with us today. First, maybe you could tell us a bit about CureLab Oncology and how that connects to your work at the McGill University Health Centre in Montreal.
CureLab Oncology is a clinical stage oncology company focused in developing therapies that leverage basically our own immune system and the microenvironment of the tumor rather than escalating chemotherapy or new cytotoxic drugs. My work at the MUHC at McGill as a gynae oncology is treating patients with all sorts of gynecological malignancies, from ovarian, endometrial, which means the uterus, cervix, and the vulva.
Could you give me a little bit more background on what platinum-resistant ovarian cancer is, and if you have any stats maybe on that as to how common that is and what the current treatments are for it?
Thank you. This is an important question. Well, we can start with ovarian cancer, which approximately 1.8% to 2% will have ovarian cancer during her lifetime. This is the lifetime risk, between 1 and 2%, which is not negligible at all. And the basic backbone treatment is cytotoxic drugs, chemotherapy, a combination which includes platinum-based chemotherapy, carboplatinum, for example. So most of the patients will respond to this first treatment, and they are called platinum sensitive. Platinum resistant ovarian cancer is when the disease recurs less than 6 months from the last cycle of platinum-based chemotherapy. Regarding some statistics, platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, or the abbreviation PROC, is not uncommon as people might think. It really depends on the molecular type of the cancer, whether you have homologous recombination deficiency or proficiency, which predicts also your response to platinum, of course. So in patients who don't have errors in their mechanism to repair DNA, which calls HRP, homologous recombinant proficient, the rate might be even 50% on the first line treatment. So I didn't mention it before, but platinum resistant can be during the first line. Patient comes, gets surgery, chemotherapy, and progresses after less than 6 months. This is primary platinum resistant ovarian cancer. And patient can have a good treatment, good response. It can be sensitive, and after 1 year, 2 years, they have recurrence, and then they can be platinum resistant, or in further recurrence. Some patients recur multiple times while they respond good to the cytotoxic chemotherapy.
Is there a reason why somebody would respond and then not respond?
It's a good question. While we treat cancer with cytotoxic drugs, we basically have some kind of a natural selection, clones of the tumor that respond, which die, and we have a tumor kill, and those who still there, which survived, quote unquote, the cytotoxic treatment, are basically selected and they are resistant. And we can have mutations on top of the currently mutations, which evolve many unknown mechanism, cellular mechanism for drug resistant, efflux of drug from the intracellular compartment. So it's a multifactorial thing.
And as far as the treatments are concerned currently, why did you decide to develop something different?
That's an excellent question. The last clinical trial until the recent progresses was in 2014, the Ovarian trial, which examined the addition of anti-angiogenic agent to the current standard of care single agent chemotherapy for platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. I didn't mention it before, but patients with platinum-resistant ovarian cancer have poor prognosis, of course. This is the main issue. They become resistant to platinum, and then single agent chemotherapy have very low response rate, single digits, perhaps double digit, 20, 15% response to single agent chemotherapy. So until 2014, this was the standard of care. And then we found that addition of bevacizumab, an anti-angiogenic factor, adds to the progression-free survival of these patients with a significant amount. And since 2014, there are not much advancement made until recent years, identification of mirvetuximab, and ADC, antibody drug conjugate, which showed overall response rates, which is quite impressive, and addition of overall survival. However, this drug is selected for certain biomarkers, folate receptor alpha, high expression. So the idea was to find a novel drug, not based on chemotherapy, not cytotoxic, because we know that platinum-resistant ovarian cancer does not respond well to single-agent chemotherapy, but to find a mechanism which incorporates immune demodulation or enhancement of our own natural immune response to treat the cancer.
So could you tell me a little bit about the drug that you've developed and how it works?
Elenagen is an investigational therapy designed to engage the immune system in a targeted way. Rather than being another form of traditional chemotherapy, it's intended to shift the biology of the tumor-host interaction, essentially trying to help the immune system to recognize and respond to the cancer more efficiently. The exact mechanism is best described as immune modulating. The goal is not just to direct tumor cell kill, but to change the conditions that allow the tumor to persist. Elenagen is a DNA plasmid vaccine for the protein which is called P62, a multifunctional protein, and it's overexpressed in many solid tumors as well as in platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. And by introducing this vaccine, we boost the immune system, the adaptive immune system of the body, to fight better the cancer and to change the microenvironment to allow better tumor kill with the help of cytotoxic drugs. So it's a combination. We use the Elenagen vaccine in combination with single-agent chemotherapy.
Where are you at on that clinical trial pathway, and what were those results that you mentioned?
In our randomized open-label phase 2 trial, we enrolled women with platinum-resistant ovarian cancer and assigned them to receive either standard gemcitabine, which is one of the arms in the Ovarian trial, alone, or gemcitabine combined with Elenagen in a weekly intramuscular injection. We had 30 patients that were evaluable for overall survival in the predefined analysis. Among those with elevated CA-125, the median overall survival improved from 13 months with gemcitabine alone to 25 months with an addition of weekly Elenagen. This is a 12 months increased and almost 60% reduction in the risk of death. Importantly, this survival benefit was achieved without added toxicity. We have also observed a duration-dependent effect, where longer exposure to Elenagen was associated with better survival outcomes. And in the setting where median survival is typically around 1 year and options remain limited, these findings support further evaluation in the larger phase 3 studies. Just to put things into context, the Aurelia study in 2014, as already discussed, the overall survival was approximately 13 months, improved to 16.5 months with addition of bevacizumab. The MIRASOL study, which investigated mirvetuximab, the overall survival improved from 13 to approximately 17 months. The ROSELLA trial, the overall survival improved from 11 months to almost 16 months. And in the most recent Keynote B96, which was FDA approved for pembrolizumab, the overall survival has increased from 14 months to 18 months. So our data, although in a very modest sample size, the increase was from 13 months to 25 months. Very impressive clinical sign. And we're aiming now at a phase 2, phase 3 trial, US-based, to further validate and substantiate our data. This means that we need a significant amount of funding. We're not a big pharma. In order to open clinical trials, a multi-center, we need significant amount of funding. I don't anticipate any problems with recruiting patients because platinum-resistant ovarian cancer is an unmet gap current in clinical practice, even though some new agents have been introduced. But again, as I already mentioned, some of those new agents are biomarker-driven, either a percentage of expression of folate receptor alpha or expression of certain biomarker which shows response to immune checkpoint inhibitor, or given together with a toxic agent, paclitaxel, which many patients are unable to receive at their current stage of platinum-resistant ovarian cancer because of toxicities. So we believe that there will not be any problem to recruit patients for this kind of multi-center study.
Ultimately, what are your hopes for those with this disease? Do you think that it could be something like HIV, where it's still there, but it's manageable?
It's an excellent question. Well, we can always say that it's very difficult to predict things, and especially the future. My hopes is that cancer will be a chronic disease, and some sort of cancers might become chronic diseases. However, platinum-resistant ovarian cancer eventually evolves and brings the patient to a center condition which are difficult to manage: bowel obstruction, problems with the GI tract, and eventually patients succumb to their cancer. However, by introducing novel agents that gain patients more time and more high quality time, this is the best that we can do. So yes, I do hope that ovarian cancer will become a chronic disease. However, if I believe it will be so, no. We need to aim at prolonging patients' life and prolonging high quality patients' life.
Yeah, that's a big distinction, isn't it? Because quite often you see where patients' lives have been extended by 6 months, but the quality of life hasn't improved either. So it seems in some ways a bit self-defeating to do that.
That's an excellent point, because many of the agents are indeed have toxicities, and I didn't mention it until now, but the toxicities observed by addition of Elenagen for platinum-resistant ovarian cancer are basically local site injections. While these patients suffer from severe bone marrow depression due to the heavy cytotoxic drugs that they have received during their journey of disease and during the current treatment with platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, the addition of Elenagen showed minor toxicities, basically local, not systemic.
Can you tell me a little bit about the presentation that you're giving in Denmark?
Presentation in ESGO is one of the most important and largest conferences worldwide in the GY oncology world. It's European-based. This year it's held in Copenhagen. It's a great meeting, a lot of clinicians, scientists, clinician scientists, pharma representative. I hope that future collaborations could be made by the presentation of our data.
Something that interested me when I was reading both the paper and the press release that came out earlier, your co-author suggested a fundamentally different therapeutic approach that supports the body's biology rather than simply intensifying chemotherapy, which seemed really interesting. I wonder if you could address that a little bit.
Yeah, thank you for this question. This is a shift in strategy. As I said, until the Aurelia trial 2014, it was cytotoxic drugs for platinum-resistant ovarian cancer. It was weekly Taxol, topotecan. Then the addition of bevacizumab, which is not cytotoxic, but it is a systemic drug aiming at the angiogenesis of the tumor. So the shift is to shift strategy. Traditional chemotherapy primarily aims to kill rapidly dividing cells. In platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, we often reach a point where increasing intensity yields diminished results and significant toxicity to patients. A biology supporting approach means focusing on the host tumor ecosystem, immune recognition, inflammation signaling, and the tumor microenvironment. So the own body immune system will be able to control the cancer, to better recognize the cancer, to change the tumor microenvironment, to allow infiltration of immune cells, rather than just to hard kill the cancer with cytotoxic drugs. So the idea is to add something, another mechanism that produces durable control without relying solely on cytotoxic tumor kill with cytotoxic drug. It's a shift in the strategy.
And you already talked about Elenagen and what you're doing with that. Does that have other potential applications in other cancers?
Well, potentially, yes. If any of the listeners have interest, they can search on the web the multiple previous basic science studies and animal basic study science with Elenagen about autoinflammatory conditions, osteoarthritis, even retinopathy, other solid organ cancers, because immune modulation can be relevant across multiple tumor types, tumor sites, and multiple chronic conditions as well. And because Elenagen has shown to reduce the inflammation of chronic inflammation, we can reach or target very wide spectrum of conditions. So the short answer is that there may be a broader application, but responsible development means prioritizing where the rationale and the initial data is the strongest, which currently we have the phase 2 randomized controlled trial data. So we're going to be more focused on platinum-resistant ovarian cancer, but as I said, there is multiple basic science and preliminary rodent and canine data to show that Elenagen works in wide spectrum of conditions.
So what are the next steps on the pathway to moving that forward?
The next steps is the classic clinical development sequence. We need to raise now funding for a multi-center study to validate our platinum-resistant ovarian cancer results, to open new trials, clinical registration of trials, and to receive support from funders.
And so what are the next milestones that you expect for the company or hope for the company?
I hope for the company to reach a partnership with big pharma or investors so we can rapidly evolve into implementing our next clinical trial. And of course, we hope that eventually we could reach similar results and get approval by the FDA for treatments with Elenagen. The clinical data is already there. We just need the funds to further progress and to make it come true for the benefit of the patients.
Well, more great work, and hopefully those studies show even more positive results to help those with ovarian cancer. From there, we'll turn our attention to brittle bone disease, also known as osteogenesis imperfecta, with Hans Schambye, CEO of BOOST Pharma. Their cell therapy treatment, BT101, is a cell therapy that is really transformative. Hi Hans, I really appreciate you being with us on the Base to Base podcast today. I wonder if we can get things going with a little background on the company.
Yeah, BOOST Pharma is an exciting company that I just joined very recently. It comes out of the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm with some great research on treatment of brittle bone disease or osteogenesis imperfecta, which is this severe disease where patients suffer multiple fractures every year because they don't produce the correct collagen and therefore their bones are very brittle. So what we have developed is a cell therapy, and it's an off-the-shelf therapy, so we can take it directly. There's no matching or preconditioning of the patients or anything. And then we treat the patients. And what we've been able to show in now several clinical trials is that we can reduce the number of fractures markedly and highly significantly, which of course gives the patients a much better quality of life. So we go in and treat very early in small babies, recently after the diagnosis is made, and then we see this remarkable effect on fracture rates. And the program is ready for phase 3. So this year will be spent on planning for that and having discussions with regulators at the FDA and the EMA, and then hopefully initiating the phase 3 trial by the end of the year. So it's a very exciting year for us.
Right. And you're relatively new to the company. What was it that attracted you about BOOST Pharma?
Yes, I've been on the board since last summer, so in that sense, I have been involved with the company for a while. And what attracted me was an outstanding team, great science, and late-stage clinical data, so remarkable results, and a pretty clear path to approval of the drug. So there are so many components that just completely align and sit right where I like them. And what is needed now is to raise some money so we can run the trial and build the team, expand the already existing team, which is something I like to do and I think I'm pretty good at. So this is a really exciting opportunity.
Seems like a good fit from both sides then, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Could you give me a bit more background on brittle bone disease and the incidences of that condition?
Yes, so brittle bone disease is what we call an orphan indication. So it's a rare disease. It's one in every 10,000 babies or every 15,000 babies. So there's about 500,000 patients worldwide. It's a disease that causes dwarfism. So the patients have retarded growth because they have a defect that leads to either low productions of collagen or no production of collagen at all. And collagen forms the backbone upon which bone is built. So without collagen, you cannot form the correct bone. And therefore, you end up with bones that are very brittle, but also that bow. So you get deformities in the pelvis, in the long bones of your legs and arms. And that results in that the severe cases are typically end up being wheelchair bound and with significant pain as one of the key symptoms of the disease, apart from the frequent fractures. So the diagnosis is typically made with an ultrasound scan of the pregnant mother. So already there you can see that the bones are bending and you can see that there may even be fractures. So the babies need to be delivered with cesarean section because many of them cannot survive a normal delivery. And this is where we can go in and start treating. And what we give these patients are stem cells that hone to the bone. So they accumulate at the bone where there is inflammation going on. And then they start secreting the normal collagen so that the patients can build normal bone. So what we're hoping we're developing is a truly disease modifying so that we are addressing the key lack of these patients, namely collagen, giving that back to them in the organized fashion that is needed for bone to form.
All right. And what are the current treatments and how effective are those?
There are no approved treatments and there are no effective treatments available. What the doctors do right now is to give a compound class called bisphosphonates, which really is an osteoporosis drug. And what bisphosphonates do is that they reduce bone turnover. So as you may know, bone is constantly built and broken down and then rebuilt. That's why if we do a lot of exercise or if you see an old farmer, he will have very big hands because his bones have accommodated to the hard labor he's doing. And that is then stunted with bisphosphonates. The problem is that brittle bone disease is not osteoporosis. So in osteoporosis, you can help the patients build back more strong bone. But here you're just making the patients build more bad bone. And it has been shown pretty convincingly that that doesn't lead to stronger bones. The current treatments don't really work on the fractures, and that's why there's such a desperate unmet need here.
Because of that unmet need, is it something that a lot of companies are trying to address?
There have been quite some activity fairly recently. A protein was discovered called sclerostin that has been shown to directly impact the bone degradation, activation of the cell class called osteoclasts. And several companies have developed antibodies to sclerostin. There's a marketed one from Amgen that's prescribed for severe osteoporosis, and that's being tested in osteogenesis imperfecta. A British company called Mereo also had an anti-sclerostin antibody that they recently reported on over Christmas. And unfortunately, that antibody failed on the primary endpoint of fracture rates. So even though they saw more bone being built, higher bone mineral density, that didn't translate into protection. We have not seen the final data from that trial yet. And I think Mereo is indicating that they would like to pursue maybe for a subset of the patients where they saw some protection, but it confirms our base assumption is that by building more bad bone, you don't really address the issue of these patients. So it's much better to give them the ability to build the correct bone again, which is what we do.
Can you tell me a bit more about your product, the BT101, and what it is, how it works?
Yeah, so it's an off-the-shelf stem cell therapy that has been developed by the Karolinska Institute. So all work has happened in Stockholm until recently. And we harvest these cells, we grow them, we treat them in a way so they become more leaning towards bone forming. That's sort of our proprietary knowledge of how to do that. And then you simply aliquot these cells, freeze them down, ship them to the hospital. They resuspend and give it as an IV infusion to the patients. And very importantly, in contrast to many other cell therapies, you don't need to do any matching of these cells because they're not immunogenic. So the recipient, the patient, doesn't react to the cells and the cells don't react to the patient. What we appear to have is a very strong safety profile. We haven't really seen any issues with the treatment. And because it can just be given, it's very easy also for the hospitals to give these infusions every 4 months. And then the cells hone to the bone. They probably hone to the areas where there's inflammation, where there's unnatural bone movements that happen because of the brittle bones. Then the cells go there and they start manufacturing new bone.
Does the stage at which you're able to intervene make a difference?
It probably does. It's an advantage that you can go in very early. Actually, the founders of BOOST are quite sort of medical heroes. And actually, so 6 of the patients that we have treated so far were treated while they were in their mother's womb. So administered into the umbilical cord, and there the cells also home to the bone. So several of these patients have mutations that we know are very, very tough and lead to low quality of life, but we now have a 22-year-old that was treated as the first patient who is doing very well and who's had significantly fewer fractures in her life so far than what would have been anticipated. So you can really go in and treat very early, which is probably good because the deformities start when the patients start to crawl and walk and the bones can't really accommodate this weight-bearing activity. So being able to treat early is important.
And is it just a one treatment? Is it necessary to repeat?
We treat every 4 months, and we expect that it may not be lifelong, but at least for a significant period, we have to continue giving more cells so that the patients can do this rebuilding of their bones with normal collagen.
All right, and you already mentioned the trials. Could you tell me something about the results from those?
Yes. So we've tested in 3 different trials. One was a compassionate use where the doctors at Karolinska were allowed to treat in 4 babies or even fetuses. And we still are in close contact with these patients and know that they're doing well. And based on the promising results from that and the strong safety that came out of that, the company was able to get money from the European Council, the so-called Horizon 2020 grant. And that grant covered a study in 18 patients where we compared the number of fractures the patients had before they were treated. Then they were treated for a year, and then we looked at how many fractures did they have afterwards. And this is where we see a 70% reduction in fracture rates. So really a remarkable rate of reduction. And in the second year after treatment, the median, so the average fractures go down to 0. So more than half of our patients don't see any fractures in that second year, which is in stark contrast to what is expected by the experts in the field and also in the published literature, where they get 2 to 3 fractures per year. And actually, you normally see a trend the other way, that more fractures happen in this time because this is the time when the babies start to crawl and walk. Obviously, they fall over and their bones cannot accommodate that, so they break. So being able to bring more than half of the patients down to 0 fractures is really promising. And we have a third little study that was just 3 patients but treated in India. And there are several important learnings from that. So first of all, we were able to ship our cells to India where they were characterized, and they look exactly like the cells that were manufactured at Karolinska. And then they were administered to these 3 patients. And again, we saw exactly the same pattern. These patients came from very many fractures. One of them had 17 fractures in the first year of life and went down to less than 2 fractures. And we've seen videos of the patient catching up in growth to his older sister and also being able to play football, which of course is a remarkable thing when you're born with such bad bones. It feels very meaningful to go to work when you can see results like that.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned India. What's the storage and transportation process like?
You can ship frozen vials to anywhere in the world and resuspend them. It's not simple because obviously shipping frozen vials across borders, etc., is complicated, which is one of the reasons why drugs are so expensive. But it's certainly feasible. And another thing that's very important is, of course, that we have good control over the manufacturing of the cells. We're actually working with a Scottish company called Roslin. They were the one with Dolly the sheep, and they are now a leading manufacturer of cell therapies for the world market. And we've thoroughly enjoyed working with them, and they have taken over and been able to show that they too can manufacture our cells and live up to the GMP specifications, which are the specifications you need to meet in order to produce and sell a drug.
And you mentioned fundraising. What's the next step on the clinical trial pathway? Is it fundraising?
The next step is fundraising, like for most biotechs. But what is quite unique for us is this is probably the last time we will need to raise money, because we can bring our drug over the goal line with the next amount of money we raise. So we are out talking to investors about a raise of 50 million euros, and that will cover our next trial, which is a phase 3 trial, and the manufacturing associated with that, and running the company and talking to regulators, all of those things you need to do in order to prepare yourself to commercialize a medicinal product.
Ultimately, what are the hopes for people with brittle bone disease, that they can live a normal life?
That's certainly the hope, that we can bring them to a place where they can live a much more normal life than they can today, maintain ability to walk, fewer deformities, less pain, higher quality of life. All of those things need to be shown. We have not shown all of them yet, but certainly the data we have so far gives us hope that that should be possible.
And what about the regulatory pathway? Where are you at on that?
Yeah, we have had meetings both with European regulators and with the FDA. Of course, there's a different FDA now, so we will be going back to the FDA this year. But if anything, the new FDA have signaled an openness to approving treatments for rare diseases and also advanced therapies, which ours is, as it's cell-based. We expect to have a very open discussion about what we need to show, and look forward to getting their guidance.
And do you have anything else in the pipeline that you're working on?
This is what we're working on. What we are thinking about is whether it can be used for other diseases, obviously bone diseases, where you, for one reason or another, don't form normal bone. But that's something we're looking at. It's early days still. For now, we have our work cut out for us. We're a small team, and running a phase 3 and doing all the things needed to be done before that is no small feat.
Is there any use for, you mentioned other uses of the drug, is aging something that you're looking at?
We're not actively looking at that, but of course, we all know that our bones get weaker as we get old. But it's a different concept. Of course, people who have normal collagen, can we really change anything for them? All of that remains to be seen. But certainly, there are opportunities that would be great to explore.
And I know that you mentioned the fundraising. What are you looking for the company in 2026 and beyond?
Yeah, we're looking for 50 million euros, which will cover everything we need to do. We have good support from we have 3 venture investors on board now. They're very supportive, but as always, right, you need some new ones to come in. You need somebody to step forward and say, I take the chance, I lead the round. But we are having very good discussions with the brand names of the industry.
Yeah, right. Is it something you'll take to market yourself, or are you looking to partnerships beyond clinical trials?
We don't have any commercial infrastructure, obviously. We don't have any experience marketing products. Of course, you can buy that. But for me, it would be much more rational that a partner would take it over and take it to market. And I think that would also make my investors more happy.
Nice when it's something that's either first in class or best in class. And clearly this is going to make a lot of difference in a lot of lives.
Yeah, it already has. Another unique aspect that I would like to mention is that in the larger patient study we did with 17 patients completing the treatment, all of the patients had benefit. So typically in clinical trials, right, you have some patients that seem to get benefit, then others where nothing changes, right? That's sort of the typical picture. Then you work with statistics to show that you've got, on average, you have improvement. But here we see benefit for everybody, which is really remarkable. Some come in with very high fracture rates and go down to almost zero. Some come in with a lot fewer fractures, right? And that's both biological variation, but it's also up to the experience of the parents, right? Because it's a genetic disease, it does run in families. So some families are much more adapted to that. They know they have to be really, really careful with this new baby. Whereas others, it's not that they're careless, but it's just they have to be so careful. And you need to sort of learn to handle your fragile little baby.
Well, and some children are more active than others.
Absolutely, yes. I already talked about the little Indian football player we have, right? That's clearly reckless behavior, but it's good reckless behavior.
So that's it for this week's podcast. Interesting and transformative therapies for treating a disease before birth, to drugs from blue crayfish, to the fight against ovarian cancer. If you do want to get in touch with guest opportunities, or if you want to advertise, please feel free to contact us at jim@deeptechdigest.com. And I should point out, as I often do, there is no connection between the two. You don't have to advertise or pay to be a guest on the show. So until next time, wherever in the world you are, I hope you have a great week ahead. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join us again next time for another Base to Base Biotech podcast. The Base to Base Biotech podcast is an Air Coastal Media Limited production.